Actually, why don't you guys all come up? Hi, everybody. How are we tonight? I guess I got this job because I'm animated. Have a seat. And we'll, once you guys sit down, we'll kind of introduce you. We're going to go by first names tonight, and we're going to keep things going. Martin and I did a legal one before, and it was super fun because it was interactive. Everybody got free legal advice. And when you ask a question, always say, hey, I have a friend who has a company that kind of screwed up, and here's what he did. So you don't want to say it was me and I kind of fucked up, right? That's not what you want to do. All right, so you guys, if you're scoring at home, from on your right, Imran with Arent Fox, Yael with Legal Pal,
or Lawpal.
Sorry, I'm so
No,
sorry.
if we change our name,
I messed up
totally
already.
go with
I know.
Legal
Again, you scoring at home. That's 0-1 for me here. Here we go. Brian with Twilio, Ross, who just spoke, Pam with Arent Fox as well, IP expert, right?
There you go.
And Fred, who's standing in for somebody that's at the White House, right? So one thing we want to find out is you guys. We're going to have Q&A at the end so that you can ask for that free legal advice, but some topics of interest. So just raise your hand if these are interesting. We'll try and cover them, and we're going to have this as interactive as possible. So convertible notes. Raise your hand if that's interesting. Okay. How about general term sheet terms, things like liquidation preferences? Okay, good. How about founder shares investing? How about getting rid of a founder? How about horror stories? All right. This looks pretty good. How about World Cup? Did you see the USA today? It was close. We won. So everybody's got mics. So why don't we kick it off? We were talking in the green room. I was trying to get them to drink as much alcohol as possible. We did an admirable job. But picking an attorney, right? So Fred, let me start with, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, so everybody's jumping, but we were talking about the fact that picking an attorney is kind of like a dating, right? So how do you go about picking an attorney? How do you validate who they are and what they can do for you? So Fred, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Well, first, I think you should always.
Is that on?
Let's see. It looks like it is.
Yeah, just get it close. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I think one thing that I see the wise startups do is they talk to more than one law firm. And I think it's easy to get meetings with a lot of different law firms. Check out the attorney that you would work with, see if you have a rapport with them. Find out if they have any expertise in the space that you're working in. And then see what freebies you can get. Because I think today most law firms will give you a lot of time at the beginning to try to help you get started. And so don't be shy about asking for freebies, because I think most every firm has them, big and small.
Awesome. All right. Yeah.
So I would say I have a lot of friends that have actually gone online to some of these lawyer-type referral places, like Avo and others, and I would not recommend doing that. I don't think that is a good way, at least right now. Maybe it will be there one day to hire an attorney. I think the best thing that you can do is to tap your network, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends, and get some names of lawyers. And then you should meet with them. You should put them through their, hoops, basically. Make them show you why they should be your lawyer. There are a lot of lawyers that would like to represent you today, and talk to them, find out what they can deliver, but don't just settle on one.
Yeah, I guess I agree with what Pam said, what Fred said. I guess, again, tap your network, and I think you'll find that you'll end up hearing a lot of the same names. And so the names that you hear from more than one person are probably the people that you should follow up with. Every lawyer is going to tell you that they can do anything that you need done, and they're the best at it. Obviously, take that with a big grain of salt. And again, validate that against your network, against other people that you know that have used these people. People who are giving you money are going to probably have recommendations as to who you should use. So those are some of the pretty obvious ones that come to my mind.
So Brian, you're our only non-attorney up there. So I mean, you had to pick an attorney. How did you kind of end up here, and did you trial and error?
Well, I think these are good points. When we were a little bit later in the stage, we had some problems that needed solving in Washington. So that's how we got to know Ross and the team and Arent Fox, and that we were a little bit later. So it was more about like specialized expertise. In this case, it was around telecommunication and Washington FCC stuff. So we just felt like we needed to go to some people that were experts. But on the other point, like, you know, as the one person up here who's not actually an attorney, you know, I think when you're talking to, like, you know, Arent Fox or Goodwin or Cooley or any of these kind of, you know, well-known firms, they can all do the job. It's not like you're going to go in there and, you know, hammer them on, you know, how to handle a contract or financing or something. But it really just comes down to rapport and, like, you know, what's your kind of personal feeling with this person? Because they're going to be like an extension of your team if you're starting a company.
Awesome.
So I am a lawyer, but I'm no longer a practicing lawyer now. I'm a founder like everyone else here. I guess that, and so we did go actually get a lawyer, and I think that the one thing to remember is that you actually don't have any way of knowing you have a good lawyer, and you won't. So you don't know that. So don't assume that you have a good lawyer. Don't assume that you know that. Don't assume that because you went to Wilson you have a good lawyer. There's a whole solo boutique market out there that is less publicized, that's less, you might hear their names around sort of less because their PR machines are sort of, you know, not as integrated into the network as the Wilsons and the Lathams or iPractice of the world, or the Arent Foxes of the world. But they could be perfect for your startup. We actually work with, we started out with Big Firm, and just know that the lawyer that you start out with might not be the person that you continue with, and that you really want to manage and be in control of that relationship the whole way through.
Imran, I'm gonna switch subjects here. I'm gonna give you a lead off on another one, if that's okay.
No, that's perfect.
Okay, good. Kind of beat this one. So founders, let's start at the beginning. Okay, we got a great idea. I'm hooking up with a guy, you know, with maybe my buddy from college, and we're gonna start something. We're founders, right? So we got the idea. We haven't built anything. I think one of the points you talked about, Ross, is, you know, lawyering up earlier than later. So what should we do? Because we're gonna get to the part where we have to kind of divorce later. Because this seems to happen a fair amount early on, especially when nothing's figured out. Other than, oh my God, this is gonna be great, we're gonna make billions. So what do we do?
Well, it's a really interesting question because I just dealt with that this morning. Actually, I'm working with a startup company which is there's a solo owner and founder, but he's partnering with somebody who's in the manufacturing business, and he's more of the idea guy, and he wants to know whether this other individual should be a co-inventor with him. Well, before you even broach a subject like that, you got to really think about, well, do you want this person? Do you want to have a long-term business relationship with this person before you decide that you're going to join him on a patent application, or do you want to give him shares in your company? What's the relationship going to look like 5-10 years down the road? And so, you know, you've really got to be careful when you're looking at both your IP, you're looking at your stock distribution, how you're allocating options, and from the IP side, because I'm a patent lawyer, what I tell clients is, well, look, there's a legal requirement that you actually have to be an inventor on the technology before you can be named as a patent. This isn't just a business decision. And if you get that wrong, then your patent can be invalidated years on down the line. So don't just award inventorship as if it's just, you know, stock options to employees at the company. Inventorship should be based on real contributions. And I don't know if I answered your question, but if you're
No, that's a good one. Does anybody have a founder question right now? I mean, that's founder related, that's germane to what we're talking about? Yeah?
The young lady just stated that she was an attorney. Bill Gates.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Bill Gates graduated as an attorney, but yet he didn't hire an attorney for a while.
We didn't, well, my answer relates to the question.
Can you repeat my questions?
So Bill Gates is a trained lawyer and didn't hire a lawyer for a long time. We actually hired a lawyer because we had a founder issue. That's what brought us to an attorney. We were three. My two co-founders were friends forever from high school. Very quickly, we learned that the third co-founder was a raging lunatic.
So it was easy.
An absolute raging lunatic. I don't know how many people here have children, but you know, you might be perfectly happy married to somebody, and when you have children, you really rethink whether or not that's the person you have children with. Creating a company is like having a baby. Ask yourself if you actually want to have a baby with this person, not if you want to date them forever. And it was I I could take the whole hour telling you what a lunatic is. But
Oh,
just
please,
trust
let's
me.
go. This sounds good, right? Just one, I mean, we talked about horror stories are kind of fun, but I mean, but the situation you're referring to, this happens a lot.
Yeah, and stuff that you don't, so we are a funded startup. Peter Thiel's our lead funder, and in a meeting with Peter, the secretary comes in and asks if we wanted anything to drink. Believe me, the answer is no, we're fine. Okay, if that ever happens to you, the answer is no, we're fine, everything is perfect. And so she brought us all water, and then he said, could I have coffee instead? And for the next 15 minutes, he just, I don't know if he had Asperger's or he had like no social skills whatsoever. And we had people come up to us and say, we love, when you don't really know, nobody's gonna invest in your idea because your idea could change tomorrow. They're investing in you. So the most important thing is that you be a pleasant, interesting, smart person, and this person would convey the opposite. And people said, we don't want to invest in you. So this was a problem, to say the least. And we did not have cliffs because they knew each other forever. And you really want to make sure that, and so we, luckily I was an attorney and we took care of it, but you really want to make sure that you don't, that you, like in any relationship, that you can talk about everything, don't assume anything. You don't know how somebody's going to react in the situations that you can't anticipate. And you need to be able to have this relation, you know, your lawyer isn't gonna be able to fix that for you. You need to be able to have a solid relationship. And if you're going to a lawyer to manage the relationship, there's already a problem in the relationship.
So, actually, if you pass that down here, I want to ask the attorneys on this end. Okay, so we talked about Cliff, and let's go, I mean, if I'm the founder, does that mean I invest fully from day one? Am I investing over time? I mean, we'll get to the divorce part, but that's pretty interesting because I think some people don't understand the mechanics, especially if you get money from a Peter Thiel or an angel or institutional investment group. You don't own all your stock. So why don't, if you guys want to maybe kind of cover that a little bit, because I think setting the expectation of what the norm is good for everybody to understand. Because a lot of people, in my experience, don't know what is somewhat standard with respect to a 4-year vesting schedule, and Cliff, and even with founders is a little different. But.
Yeah, one thing on the last point, I did a startup myself, and one of the things I was going to mention that you should think twice before you just do a startup with your friends, because I found that people couldn't speak frankly to each other, and we had a lot of money from shareholders, and you know, you have to do things in the best interest of shareholders. And so before you do a business with your friends, make sure you can speak frankly to each other, because your friendship may come in the way of doing what should be done, particularly when you try to get rid of a founder.
Yeah. So, how do you guys handle ownership from day one? How do you split it up? How do you how do you set up a schedule for vesting? Because you mentioned Cliff, yeah. So.
So it's in the I'm just saying, as I'll speak as a founder and everyone else is a lawyer. You kind of give it. I mean, we were 3. My role was minimal in the beginning when the silver company started up, and so you give it a good guess, I guess. And in the beginning, there's still a lot of sort of leeway when you're sort of having the discussion. But again, you need to make sure that it's a discussion, that you're able to talk about everything. And a cliff means like, if the shit hits the fan within that period, you know, that person doesn't walk away with your company. And this whole, you know, if you trust the person, then then you should all have cliffs, right? You really don't know what's going to happen, and a year in, you have a much better idea of where you stand.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question directly, I mean, there isn't a prescription for this. There isn't like, you just do it this way, this is how it's done. It's a negotiation, it's an internal discussion, and so there's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of addressing this issue. And so, to Fred's point, be able to speak frankly, and then have some realistic expectations. It varies by industry, it varies by, I mean, what's like, is this a long-term play, short-term play? What market sector are you in? So there's all sorts of variables that inform the answer to that question, but all generally speaking needs to be kind of vetted very, very carefully and very thoroughly early on.
Good, okay.
I was just gonna say there, I think investors wanna see more unvested. So when you think about the proportions, the investors wanna see stickiness. And so whatever you come up with, however you allocate it, you wanna see more unvested than vested.
Yeah, the other thing is set the expectation as an entrepreneur. Let's say you've been working on an idea for 3 years, 2 years in your garage, and 1 year with your buddy full-time. When you get money, that doesn't mean you're gonna get credit for all that. An investor is going to want you to stick around and not have you only vest in maybe in 12 months. They're going to reset the clock. It's part of a term sheet negotiation, and everybody's shaking their head. It's like, yeah, that's a surprise one to a lot of people. They're like, really? I didn't know that. So we were talking about convertible notes for a minute, right? Oh yeah.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Have you guys ever served on a board, and would you advise having a lawyer on a board to be a part of a board to make it work better in terms of like a board of advisors or a shareholder arrangement? Or could you talk about some of the good stories or horror stories about board formation and putting that together and making, basically the next step, once you get investors who are coming in, how do you properly set up a management system to run the company?
Let me put some context on that. So it's going to depend on the stage of the company. So, I mean, if we kind of short track it, early stage, are you talking about early stage board of advisors or board of directors?
Board of directors, board of advisors, whatever.
So you typically don't need a board until you actually raise money and you have institutional investors. So let's just jump ahead to that.
In the back, just repeat the question that he got.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wade was asking, with respect to kind of board of advisors or board of directors, is there a role for an attorney?
Yeah.
There typically is, but I'll let you guys kind of cover that.
Or if anybody has not had experience with that.
Okay.
I just had a thought on advisory boards. I actually was going to mention something about that a second ago. Of course, we're talking about defending yourself and kind of structuring your deal. I mean, a bunch of attorneys, of course. But one thing that the kind of agreements either with your co-founders and also with your advisors early on do is like, it's really, they're tools to align people's interests. Right? So it's not necessarily about covering your ass in like the worst possible scenario. It's just about it's more often about generally like aligning people so that they're thinking about the next 12 months and kind of have a long-term goal that's aligned with yours. And the same goes for advisors. I've been an advisor to companies, and also it's a very popular thing obviously here is to kind of align yourself with advisors. But one of the things that happens is over time, not because they're bad people or anything, but it's a secondary or third thing for them on the list of things to do, and they probably have a day job too. So it's very difficult to keep them engaged in a way that's meaningful to you as a startup. And so this is where the agreement with actually having an attorney working with you from the beginning can structure those agreements in a way that actually makes it so that you can kind of separate from those advisors in a graceful way that's not like confrontational. It's kind of like it's up to them to be engaged at a certain level in order to realize whatever's on the table for them in terms of equity or payment or whatever.
Right. Good comment. So speed round, I'm going to get your hands, guys, here. So advisor terms, 2 years? 3 years?
2 to 3 generally.
Yeah? 4?
Two would be what I would generally recommend.
No, Cliff?
When I do advisory board agreements, the way I do them is that I have them expire annually. So they're 4-year terms, but they expire annually, so that we don't have to go through the trauma of terminating an advisor. So that's the way I try to do that.
Trauma, I like that. Avoid trauma.
Yeah, and I'm an advisor to certain companies too, and I do that to myself as well, because I think it's fair, because if the person isn't performing, you don't want them anymore, but it's hell to try to go through and to terminate an advisor.
That's interesting. So 2 to 3 years is pretty relatively standard, yeah. Actually, that's a novel approach, Fred, I think,
Can I say something as a founder?
Yeah.
So lots of people want to advise
Microphone.
a company, but I think that we've only taken
back.
we've only taken advisors who've actually given us advice, who've actually helped us. So I'm not rewarding somebody for what they might do. I'm rewarding them for what they've done, and that's who's on our advisory board. People who have gone the extra mile because that's their character, that's who they are. They've really shown that they're invested in the company, And we then reached out to them and asked them if they wanted to be on our advisory board because it felt fair, you know, to somehow formalize the relationship that they already had, which.
Okay, right here in the Giants hat, way to go.
Hey, so on this topic, so I'm a sole founder and I have 2 advisors right now, and right now we haven't done anything formal. There's no agreement, but I'm also I'm in the process of also doing a round of investment.
Yep.
So so I want to formalize sort of terms with my advisors and figure out what points
Yep.
I should give them and how much.
Yep.
Any general advice there? Half a point, quarter of a point, and
Oh, actually, so it's a great question. I'll just, before I hand it over to you guys, like advisor amounts can vary widely, like tremendously. I mean, from somebody that helped you wrote your plan to introduce you to first, you know, investors that works with you daily, has industry contacts. You know, it can go anywhere from, you know, a quarter, a third of a point to 4 or 5%. That's on the high end extreme. I would not recommend that, but you know, you guys. Maybe we'll do, go ahead, Ross.
No, I agree with exactly what you said. And again, it's one of these things, it's all contextual. It's who are the 2 advisors, what have they done for you? It's like, you know, you had a really hot waitress and gave you great service, so you gave her a 40% tip. You gave the okay waitress who kind of was fine, you know, 10%. I mean, that's kind of like the way that you kind of figure these things out, honestly. But there isn't any kind of prescription as to how it's going, but it's all very kind of context and you know, touch and feel.
But make sure those shares vest.
Yeah.
Keep a vesting schedule.
Yeah.
You don't want to give all those shares outright, so make sure they vest.
Also, sorry. You also want to make sure that they're tied to whatever it is you expect. So a lot of times, people have expectations that are not verbalized. When we talk about communication, one of the things that's really important is that if you've given somebody something and you expect something in return, they probably have also a set of expectations. It's very important that those things be clear and then clear again, so that they know why you're giving them the shares. Perhaps it's even sort of memorialized in writing, so that if they don't meet those expectations, you have recourse. Not recourse.
Yeah. Right here.
Hi, first off, thank you. This is great to hear from experts. So I've founded a company, I've been working on it for like 2.5 years or so. I made a technical mistake, which I'm kind of going back and fixing in the process.
You mean your friend founded a company?
Yeah, I'll own up to
that
it.
one, that friend?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Me, myself, and I. Myself and I. So I'm in the process of kind of renovating the technology, and in this same sense, I'm kind of revisiting the legal structure. And I set it up as an LLC just to have a structure. I think somebody recommended having a legal entity where you could kind of house everything and shield yourself. I'm now kind of at the point where I think it probably makes sense to probably move from an LLC to probably an S corp or full corp. I guess my question is what kind of advice would you give on providing share schedules? I mean, should I establish how many shares should I establish, and what is reasonable to expect in going forward on how I divvy those up? I mean, should I just set up like 100 million shares and just piece them out as I take on equity or investments over the next 3, 5, 7 years, assuming it's successful?
I forgot to preface the entire presentation with, we're not giving legal advice up here, and you are not our clients, and you can't sue me for malpractice. So, with that being said, and please sign the waiver on the way out.
Notwithstanding the foregoing, right? Isn't that the
classic legal term?
So again, I want to kind of give you a substantive answer to your question, but at the same time, there are so many things that we need to understand to kind of give you an intelligent answer that would be at all helpful to you.
Sure.
But yeah, you should give yourself enough stock to, and is it just you in the company or not, right?
Yes, I've hired other people, but fully on a contract basis.
Okay, and so yeah, and you've got that all papered up, right? Anyway, so
Mention assignment agreement and
in any event,
I did that.
we should have an offline conversation about this, honestly. But there are so many nuances to answer that question, but you should give yourself enough stock so that you should authorize enough shares so that you can, bring on people, bring on funding, and do all the things you want to do to kind of get where you want to go.
Is it best just to do that at like one fell swoop at the beginning and just put a huge amount and then just divvy it out over time, or just constantly go back? Because
You can always amend it. I mean, you can always change these things as you go on. And to your question as to the entity type, it would probably be a C corp that you would establish.
Okay.
But yeah, that kind of a decision isn't one that's going to be like. I mean, it's something to think about, obviously, and we'd have to talk about what your plans are in terms of down the road and where you are. You're 2 or 3 years into it. So anyway, you could authorize a big chunk of stock. And if your needs change in that regard, or if some event occurs where you need more, you can always amend and change your underlying documentation.
Fine.